to do all this stuff. Sorry, we already started, and I just remembered to turn you guys on.
So this is part of the
Okay.
notes, you said?
So now we're recording. Yes, this should be probably the first blank in the outline. The outlines or the notes after this, I'll have them more exactly like these notes. So it's considered statistical significance if it's less than 5% chance that it was a coincidence. Some say that should be less. So is it significant? Well, only 5% says that, oh, it just happened by chance. Then yes, they say it is significant. It's a significant statistic. Central tendency summarizes the data. For example, the mean, median, and mode. What's the mean?
Average.
Average. What's the median?
The number in the middle.
The number in the middle. And what's the mode?
Most frequent occurring number.
The most frequent number used. Yeah. The mean, the most commonly used measure for central tendency. So they'll use the average to say in the statistics. If you're using inferential statistics, it makes generalizations from a bunch of different data. We did all this research, we got the data. That's called inferential statistics. But as you'll see in a minute, the mean can be distorted. And if that's having to do with your grades, you don't like that. Measure of variability tells us how different or scattered the results are, how varied the results are. Whether they're all 85s or were they all different numbers. The range refers to how far apart the numbers were. The scores range from 75 to 95. That's your range. Standard deviation refers to how far the scores are from the average. And I looked up to remember how to figure out standard deviation, and we're not going to. Have you done that before in statistics or math classes?
What is standard deviation?
Yeah, we're not going to do that in here. We're just going to be, if you have any problems, you'll be given the standard deviation.
Yeah.
If there's a small deviation, that means all the scores are close to average. If there's a large deviation, the scores are far away from, spread out from the average. That standard deviation is most important when you have the bell curve, the normal curve, not any scores that are further out or further in. Okay, survey, quick survey. How many of you, when you're studying for the test, which I'm sure you're doing now and not waiting to after you have 6 chapters to study for, would rather study from the book or from notes? How many would rather study from the book? How many would rather study from notes? Okay, and I'll make sure all this stuff is in the notes for chapter 2-1.
Quiz. I mean, in this book, there's quizzes in the back of each chapter. So quizzes
Yeah, that
in
helps.
each chapter, so I don't know.
For the reading quizzes, you have to study from the book. Okay, frequency distribution. That's a table or graph or a figure that shows how each value occurs, how often they occur. How many 85s were there? How many 100s were there? That's your frequency distribution. How often were they how often were the 85s distributed? So in a normal distribution, it's your bell curve. You have a mean, median, and mode. All are equal, and they have equal distribution. Let's look at it. So the mean, median, and mode are all equal because it's symmetrical. 65% of the score, on there now. No, 68% of the score is within one standard deviation. So one deviation above the mean, one deviation below the mean, 65% are here. And I said 68, right? Yeah, 95 are within 2 standard deviations, and 99% are within 3 standard deviations, and then you have the people who get 110 and absolute 0. Again, standard deviation is how far away it is from the mean. A normal distribution has a smaller, standard distribution A has a smaller curve. So a smaller standard deviation. This one has a larger standard deviation because it's further apart. Is that making sense? Okay. Can't see David. All right, then let's look at percentile rank. The percentage of a score below a specific score. All right, don't say anything. Everyone just do it. If you received a percentile rank of a score that was 1 standard deviation above the mean, what would your percentile rank be? Everyone figure it out and then tell me. Wait, don't say it till I ask. If you received a percentile rank of a score that was 1 standard deviation above the mean, what would your percentile rank be? Thank you. Everyone got it?
I think so.
I hope so.
What would you have?
13.16.
I would say 34.13, right? Because it's between 0 and 1. Not 1 and
I got something different?
It's 1 above.
I thought 13.59.
So it's between 1 and 2.
Anybody got anything different? Okay, we can go back. Okay. So you ended up at the standard deviation, 1 standard deviation above the mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you ended up here. Here. So that's 34% more than the mean.
Right.
But it's also 50% more than those that fell below the mean. Right?
That makes sense.
So what would your score be? %,
50%.
plus 34%.
84%.
Yours would be 84%.
Oh, so that's how you
Yes? Yes?
Yes. Correct.
So
So-
if there were to be like 2 up,
It'd be where the 13 is. So, because the way you should read it is 0 to 1.
Well, let's look at this one. It might
So
be
you
easier.
Finish at 34. And so everything behind that 34.
So it would be 34 plus 13, whatever that is,
47.
plus 50.
50. So 97. Okay.
Okay, you can do it.
And if it's negative, would you read it from right to left?
Your percentile rank is everything this way. So from here to where
Okay.
the score is.
Okay, so if you have a negative, it's only
That would only be
what's in front of it.
so
Right.
Negative deviation, just 1 negative deviation. That would just be.
If you're 1 below the mean,
Right.
you'd have 50 minus 34.
Okay.
So that's like,
So you either add
We
up
did
or
math.
subtract,
So in teaching, many years ago I learned that your test scores should have a bell-shaped curve.
right.
If there are too many down here, you're not teaching enough, and if there's too many here, you're not teaching well enough. From the teacher's perspective, you need to teach better. So that means, I think I've got a slide on it. 68% of the scores should be in here.
Right. Oh,
So 68 of them
I get it.
should be a C. And then 13, this many more, 13% more should have a B or a D,
Right.
less and more
Makes sense.
A's. And then you got these people who cheat and get zeros and people who get 110. Yes?
Are we going to be graphing the bell curves?
No. You might have a bell plot and have to interpret it.
Okay. I'm really glad.
All right, so then you've got those that aren't the bell-shaped. You've got the skewed ones, also called positively skewed if it's right skewed, and negatively skewed if it's left skewed. Right skewed, there are some unusually high scores. Left skewed or negative, there are some unusually low scores. But most of the scores are high. So I think those are blanks to fill in. And the things that I've highlighted aren't necessarily the things you need to know. You need to know everything. I know some teachers do that. They highlight just the things, the important things. This is more just to help you stay focused with the notes. So the mean for a right skewed distribution is distorted toward which side of the tail on, if it's right skewed?
It's right. The tail would go up in the, from left to right. It's positive.
Not a line, the curve. Is it curved this way or curved this way? Is the tail on the right or the left?
Would be on the right.
Yes,
That's for the positive.
because it's skewed, it's got some high scores. Let's practice. All right, silently, everyone find the mean, the mode, and the median, and then we'll decide which you would rather use for a grade curve. You can use your calculators if you need to. I would need to. Everyone's finding the mean, median, and mode. For these scores here. Please use your calculators. Are you really doing that in your head?
I'm trying.
I won't disturb you then. Everyone have it? Everyone need more time? That's a lot of water. Is that water? Good for you.
Oh, you're gonna have to use it down. Okay.
All right, everybody need more time? All right. Mean,
Yes.
85?
I got a little bit lower, but
Yeah, if we
I
round,
got 80.
83.
Oh, I got 83.8.
85.
But I-
83.8.
If you round up, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Mode,
Yep.
Yeah.
80. Median,
Yep.
79. Which would you prefer to be used for a grade curve,
The highest.
assuming your grade was low?
If you want the grade curves, right?
The grade curve is where you points to make it 100, and then you add that to each.
It can be curved different ways.
Right.
It can be curved, okay, we'll take the mean, the average score, and then add points to that. Or you can take one of these other scores and add points to that.
I would say mode because it's the most frequently.
That's what I said.
Nothing's
You're going to end up with a better grade
Yeah.
Mode is the
if they
best.
use the mode. Yeah.
Because it's the most occurred test score.
And it's a lower number.
Right. So it makes no sense for the person who got 120. It makes no sense to use his or hers because it's an outlier.
Right.
It's completely out there. It makes no sense to use the lowest because that's not going to help anybody.
Right.
But if you take the average of the class or the mode, which is 80, it makes more sense because that's more frequently there. Or those below 80, which is most of them, are still going to have get a higher number, positive number, rather than it doesn't affect.
And just in general terms, if the professor is looking at the 85, oh, everyone did fine. It doesn't need a curve.
Right.
But if I'm looking at the mode, oh, 80, yeah, I think I'll curve it.
Right.
So why does that matter? You don't have a choice of how the professor uses it, or which one he uses or she uses. What does that matter for you to know whether the mean or mode was used? When will,
How well you did on the exam, or?
Produces.
okay, what other life situations that you're going to see?
Financial.
In like general psychology terms, or
No, just life. News, specifically, maybe.
Epidemic-wise, cases of corona.
Yeah. What method did they use? Which term are they using? Saying the average American, da, 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 or are they saying most Americans, or according to statistics, Americans, 85% of Americans do this. Well, or 85% of Americans agree with this political candidate. Are they using the mean, the mode? Or not usually, no, sometimes even the median. And you know to watch statistics. You can find anything to back what you want to believe. But sometimes it matters when it gets into different areas of life, or if you're trying to help somebody else who maybe isn't thinking clearly, and to be able to, maybe not, if they're not thinking clearly, they're not going to understand all of this, but at least put it in lay terms to be able to explain to them and help them think logically. Possible? Okay, that's the end of those notes. Blame it on the brain.
Good job.
What you get out of it.
Good job.
I mean, it was a lot easier to read than gigs.
Yeah,
Right?
gigs,
It'd be a lot
Griggs.
easier, but
Yes, sir.
Okay, now it's good class participation time. Did anybody not read it?
I don't have it. It
Oh.
wasn't in the bookstore. I'm gonna have to buy it on eBay. I wanted to get it in the bookstore. It wasn't there.
Really?
He said something I really did appreciate.
So wait a minute. So yeah, make sure you get that before next Tuesday.
That's what I'm saying, because I wanted to get it right away and pay more. I need it right now.
Get the Kindle sample version until it comes in. Yeah.
Okay.
Sample gives up to, I think, chapter 2 or something like that. 2 or 2.5.
Yeah, yeah.
Who else?
I don't have it, but it's in the mail on the way here.
It's in the mail. Heard that story before.
My friend has Amazon Prime. Maybe I'll ask her. Amazon Prime, things like that.
Yeah. It's kind of longer these days, but
Well, yeah,
And this is kind of a remote place that things get to.
Let me look and see if I can.
Yeah, you can get the Kindle and you can get it right away. You can even do it now if you want, because, except Crystal, she can't. She's not working.
So, for me, I liked how
Okay.
in the very beginning, he was talking about just real life situations of what can affect your brain. But then towards the last, and going on to like page 20, he really just talks about the alternative approach, which is, he says that what is needed is not necessarily more sophisticated in understanding the brain. Instead, what we need is a more in-depth practical examination of scripture that is relevant to outline questions, whether it's a mental disorder or anything that is progressive, like Alzheimer's, dementia. I find that really encouraging to read and see that approach, because I think a lot of today, the world says, this is the best way to treat this, or this is the best medication on how to deal with this, rather instead of, okay, what does the Lord first say about it, instead of seeing a psychologist or whatever. But I just found that really encouraging to read.
I didn't read it, but yeah, I think like what he said was important, but I also think that it's like seeing a psychologist is okay. I think it's important to see that. And I think medication is okay. Because disorders, you can't shy away from disorders. And I know you know this, because a disorder is something that you can't just like walk away from, you know? Like, if I'm anxious about a test that you give me, it's just normal anxiety. But like, if I have an anxiety disorder, it's an over-obsession of anxiety, you know?
I
So it
do
just
know.
comes this little thing in the brain that it eats away, and it just goes and goes and goes. And like in a normal person, the brain, like, there's like, I don't know what it's called, I think it's
Synapse.
adrenaline.
Oh.
And like, or GABA, you know, and it like eats away at it when you have a disorder. So like a normal person, it doesn't eat away at it, you know?
We'll study those in
Yeah.
chapter 4, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely not disregarding medications. I would be very leery of psychologists.
Yeah.
Biblical counseling, obviously, what you're getting, is going to be much safer.
It's important too.
What else? What else you guys got?
I like the chart that he included with the different views that some people have. So he was talking about how
More chart.
late scientists would refer the Bible over science, and then we slowly digressed. We went to
Oh yeah, Bible over
science,
science, science over Bible.
and then Bible next science, which I think the latter two are just completely wrong. It should always be the Bible before science. But I think I really did appreciate that, because it gave me a clear understanding of what people in a scientific field might be trying to go through, and what ministry they might have there too. So it was pretty unique how you
Yeah.
just explained it.
For me, after reading the chapter, it's I'm kind of like not convicted, but I'm kind of confused within. So we're supposed to take every single like thought captive in obedience to the word of Christ. Yet, if our thoughts become their own according to the science behind our brain, and we have biblical principles how we're supposed to think, which one do we relate to? Which one we hold on to? That's kind of where I'm at. I don't like really know how to follow the idea that there's science behind our brain when there's like a second nature that takes over within the biblical principles that we have.
Does that second nature take over?
Well, if we're able to be obedient and through the Holy Spirit in us, we're able to follow the guidelines of God's word, then it shouldn't be able to take over. But there's always that second nature that comes out of us if we're not aware of
That's
it.
the old man.
Wait.
But more than thoughts and just the way that our brain behaves, I feel like it would be more like this within the second nature. It would be more of like behavior, like instincts, which is kind of different. I don't know. I'm like really confused.
I'm trying to follow everything you're saying, but I think what you're saying is who's in control.
Yes.
Is it the brain and the brain control the behaviors, or do we make a choice in our behaviors?
Yes. That's where I'm at, and I'm like so confused.
I think as we go further into the book, you will be less and less confused, but our behaviors are a choice.
Yeah.
As our brain changes, for example, Alzheimer's or something, it makes it more difficult
Absolutely.
because of those changes in the brain.
Okay.
And sometimes, again, like dementia or brain injuries, some of the things that were there that were able to be masked become revealed because of the injury. Or the,
How does God's sovereignty fall into like behavioral change?
Rebecca?
I might be thinking of a different subject, but maybe this relates. One of the things that I heard one time is we can't control our nature, but we can control our behavior.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by God? Are you finished? Are you continuing?
No, what's up?
I hate it when people interrupt me, so I don't want to interrupt somebody. So, what do you mean God's sovereignty?
I find it hard to like explain myself, but like God controls, like God has power over everything we do. So every situation has an outcome, and then depending on the way that we deal with them, then it can be less or more godly. So how does that fall into the way that our brain works?
I'm back on God controls everything we do. We have a free will in what we do.
Yes, but depending on the decisions that we make, then he can use it for greater or lesser glorification for his name.
Right.
His sovereignty doesn't change.
Right.
So, ultimately,
But how does that affect the way that we behave?
well, that's up to you.
It's our
So,
choice.
Like Professor Stelz was saying, God gave us this free will, and we have God's word, and we can refer to God's word, and we can obey God's word, or we can get to a point where we can be anxious. God's word says, be anxious of nothing. We can get to a point where we can get angry. God's word says we should not be angry without cause, justifiable cause. And so when we get really to behavior aspects, that's all about how you really want to do that. You can take it and say, well, I'm going to be anxious because of this test, or you can choose to say, Lord, whatever I get on this test is for your glory. And so if you want to continue down the anxious route, that's what you're going to produce. So if you want to look at it as you reap what you sow. So if you want to reap anxiety, or if you're going to sow anxiety, you're going to reap anxiety. If you're going to sow anger, you're going to reap anger. If you want to sow righteousness, you're going to reap righteousness. It's a thought complex. That's how you look at it.
Okay, but combining those two, some people, because of their brains,
Right.
are more predisposed to anxiety.
Right.
So that battle is going to be extremely more difficult. And they may always live with the goal is not to get rid of the anxiety. If you can relieve it, great. And if your thought patterns can be renewed to think, so you're not going to have anxiety, good, do that. But if you're still going to be predisposed to anxiety, and that's not going to be taken away, and there's nothing you can do to prevent it, then how do you respond to it?
Exactly. That's exactly what I understand.
David, you had something to say. Do you remember what it was? It was a long time ago.
No, I thought something that stood out to me was like how, so it was like on page 25, where it gave the example of the pastor counseling a female practitioner, and how, like he spent like 4 years into it, you know, and the will comes along and tells you something different, and how fast your brain just swaps. I thought that was really neat. Like after going through something for so long, and like seeing that it's working, but it's harder that way, it seems like. But how like someone, say like your neighbor, like they said your neighbor comes along and tells you that they go to this person, they give them the medicine, and how easy their brain just swaps. I don't know, that was just kind of interesting to me.
And as you start working with people, I am shocked at how even Christians are so deceived and so, like, you don't know this? I taught my kids this when they were 5. Maybe they were taught that when they were 5 too, but many are not. And maybe a lot of you haven't been. And being here is helping you understand things better. I'll talk about when I do the notes. This is your time. Go ahead.
This is just a question. It might be very obvious or not, but do you think that the way that our brain works depends on circumstances, or the way that
Depends on what?
circumstances?
Circumstance, okay.
Or do you think it depends on our character?
Nurture, nature, combination. What are your thoughts? I haven't heard from you two yet. I know you didn't read it, but still. But you read it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I
even
feel
just from
like
the conversation.
throughout like this whole reading, like I really try to compare like the information that I'm reading compared to how I function. And I don't know, like I feel confused because I don't function like a lot of these things.
I don't think I remember functioning so much in here. What do you mean?
Just, like,
Example,
how
maybe.
Someone like when people mention like disorders or how the basics of like this first chapter, like I don't know, I feel like I can't like grab hold of it because I function like how I think is different from what the book says, not in the aspects of facts and stuff like that, but how like my brain works. I don't know.
I'm not sure I'm following you. Like, give me, like, because you have a what we say, a normal functioning brain, and you don't have these extremes, or you think differently. Okay.
We had
Translate.
This conversation a couple of times. Is that the way that I think is way different from the way he thinks. So the way that I perceive the book that I'm reading can be more common to the way that people perceive the book that they're reading, according to what he perceives of the book, just because of
Just 2 different viewpoints.
yes.
Give me an
And it's,
example.
like, less common one because of the way that he thinks due to his character and circumstances from the past.
I understand that, but I can't see how that would come into play very much in this chapter. Can you give an example? Because it'll be important for future, how you're seeing this in the future.
I'm trying to think how I'd say it.
You think I'm going to let
Yeah.
Crystal think, and we'll come back to you. Thoughts so far?
I don't know.
From just what we've been saying, what do you get this chapter is about? We've gotten kind of detailed on it rather than big picture.
psychology and biblical principles can be applied and like intertwined to each other.
Okay. Rebecca, how would you summarize this introduction and chapter?
The introduction chapter sounds like it's saying like all of this stuff that goes on in our brain is a real thing and it's definitely a problem and it affects how so many people experience their day-to-day life. But we also need to view that with a biblical worldview, with the mindset that like they can still change. They can still change.
I feel my brains are hurting.
Respond better. Parents can respond better to environments and experiences.
Yeah. That's a good summary. Yeah.
I have a question. Do you think when God designed Adam and Eve, He designed them for the brain to work the way that it works now?
I'm sorry, I'm getting the last part of your
Sorry,
sentence.
I just don't pronounce things very well.
I get the first half and then the last.
Yeah, I mumble a lot.
Do you think God designed Adam and Eve?
Yeah. Do you think that He designed,
Yes, He designed
their
them.
brains to work the way that they do now?
Do you
Or
think?
somehow within the science?
Or do I think they've evolved?
Yeah.
Like a deep.
I don't know.
I definitely devolved.
Well, no. Yes, I don't believe our brains have evolved to be stronger or better over time.
Right.
Do you mean
If that's what
because
you're
of
asking.
fall?
Yes.
I would say because of the fall, our brains work the way they do now.
Less.
Right, they devolve, but when Adam and Eve were created, you have to have this mentality. They could use 100% of their brain function,
Yeah.
while we can only use like what, 40?
10%.
10?
10,
Yeah.
yes, 10%.
So it's rightly insane, and to really grasp and think that.
That's what I'm trying to think right now. Like, I'm tripping.
Well, I don't know. The Bible doesn't say they could use 100% of their brain,
But they were perfect. God created them with perfect
but they had the capacity to sin.
Oh,
because of free will.
So is that perfect?
Because it's the Lord's ability that He gave them.
But-
Up until
Yes.
sin happened.
But they didn't have the knowledge of good and evil, so that wasn't 100%. Or was that their spirit that didn't have the knowledge?
Chapter 1.
I don't think we're going to get an answer to that one. All right, let's come back to Cairo.
So, I think one of the ways that I don't really understand a lot of the statements is because I don't go to, well, for my personal sake, like I don't go to a scientifical like method or very biblical method when I like have rationale. Like I know this is just introduction about the two subjects and how we should, take forth when we're looking at different situations and how we should learn. If we, like how the world has a perspective on psychology from a scientific way, and us as Christians should have a way that we should, like, not downplay psychology, but we should have a biblical method to treat subjects like anxiety and stuff like that. But, like, how kind of I understand it is, I don't know, I kind of have a mindset that, so like all these subjects that like is talked about, like anxiety and other disorders, is like, for me, I feel like it sometimes doesn't exist. I don't know if that's just me being crazy, but that's how, because I can understand people being stressed and anxious about situations, because like, I see it a lot, but I don't know, like I've gotten to the point that like the power, like the word like anxiousness and stress, like it's just a word that has too much power, if that makes sense.
Okay.
If you're trying, like, I don't know if it.
I
like,
think I
connects.
understand what you're saying now. Two parts to that. Important, you say you don't go to science, you don't go to the Bible. Hopefully, for the next year or so, you'll learn how to go to the Bible more for the answers and for how to think. As far as it not being existent, whatever,
I mean, it's definitely real,
but you don't know it is real.
I don't know. I know it's real, but I don't feel like.
But
it takes
you
over.
don't know it is real.
Yeah.
You may never have experienced an anxiety attack
Yeah.
or known someone close to you that tried to commit suicide and understood why. And that's something I think as time progresses and you experience more, it will become more real.
Cause
Yeah.
it's difficult to talk about in a class situation, but like I don't know. I can talk to you after class about the situation, but
Okay. I'm going to be a little transparent here. Yes, it is very different to talk about in the class. And I would have you pray for my extended family. We're in a serious crisis right now. And everything that I've been learning since last February, what God's been teaching me with biblical counseling and thinking this way, that I knew it when I was 5. But as I'm understanding it more, and now with this huge experience, I'm really understanding it more. And even as I'm sitting here talking with some of the things that you were talking about and thinking of my situation or my relative situation, it's like, oh my goodness, it's real. And these principles are real, whether I like them or not. I'd rather it just be the brain and blame it on that, but it's not. But like I say, it's a totally different world when you actually experience it yourself. That might not be totally what, but that could be part of it. What time is it? Okay, I'm gonna give you the notes of things that I want you to make sure you know from the chapter. Slideshow. Slideshow. From the beginning. Thinking about how we think.
It only uses 10%.
All right. Blame it on the rain. I love that picture. I don't know why, I think it's cool.
Is that still within the chapter 1 notes?
No, this is blame it on the brain notes.
Okay.
And there are fill in the blank ones for that. Does everyone have that? I'll give you a second to get it.
I can't because I can't get it to Candy, but I'll get it from somebody.
Okay, it's not. If someone doesn't have it at this point, send them the one that you filled in, because
Who needs that?
I'm gonna need the first one because it deleted the original one that I had. So,
if there's any way I can help with those issues, let me know. Otherwise, talk to IT.
I think it's just because
The IT help desk. Okay, a knowledge of brain functioning can help us answer questions about chemical imbalances. That is a real thing. And the appropriateness of psychiatric medicines. It can also help us distinguish between physical and spiritual problems. Understanding how the brain works, we can realize, oh, okay, that's a physical problem. Or that just makes the spiritual a little harder. My skepticism with biblical counseling. In years gone by, it used to be called Neolithic counseling. And it was totally throw your medicine in the toilet, just trust God. And I knew 2 women who died. One was physical. She had cancer, could have been healed, but said, no, I believe God's going to heal me. I believe God's going to heal me. Didn't take the medicine, didn't do any of the treatments, and died. And the other woman, I don't know the full story on her, but I know that she stopped taking her psychiatric medicines and died from it. So I was very skeptical going in. I went to the conference. I said, okay, I have my degree in counseling, but this is kind of a little different. But as soon as I was there for a short time, I was all in. This is what I believe. This is what I do. Yes, you got all this good psychology stuff, but it's the Bible. And when I go to counsel someone, my husband Todd would say, don't fret, don't be nervous. You know the Bible. But in my mind, I was like, yeah, but I don't know, which do I do, CBT or do I behavioral? And he just kept reminding me, you know the Bible, you know the Bible. And so when I went to this conference, it reiterated that. The biblical counseling is the Bible. You know the Bible, you give the Bible, and the Bible is the one that makes the change. God makes the change, not us. So, so I've seen the extreme one way, you throw all your medicine in the trash. I've also seen the extreme the other way, where people try to fix problems with medication. They try to fix sin with medication. Or blame it on the brain. Oh, well, he has this brain disorder, his chemicals weren't right, so he did these horrendous things. And that's the other extreme. So, physical and spiritual. In secular circles, brain chemistry is considered the ultimate cause for every human problem and the real cause of behavior. Again, you're going to be working with people, even fellow students, who have been told this by their doctors, by their psychiatrists, by their teachers, that your brain causes the behavior. That is not true. Historically, the brain has received either too little credit or too much credit, which is what I was just telling you about. A brain researcher makes the statement, the brain is a remarkable instrument that participates in or contributes to all behavior. Note what's highlighted there. It participates, it contributes. By the time it gets down to the next person, it becomes, my brain made me do it. And was that example in this chapter about the guy, the reporter asked him, why did you do it? And he said, if it wasn't, I won't. Okay, it's in another chapter. I don't see how anyone can be a scientist and deny intelligent design. It goes beyond me. We often hear what we want to hear. And as we go through this book, the Brain book, we're going to see both. Sometimes it is legitimate to blame our misbehavior on the brain, and sometimes it isn't. So our goal for this class is to learn a way of thinking that will allow us to think biblically, and in turn, enable us to minister biblically with confidence, wisdom, and most importantly, compassion. I think the more you understand what's happening in the brain, the more compassion you'll have. And I would add from what I said a minute ago, the more experience you have with it, the more compassion you'll have as well. Okay, any other thoughts on blame it on the brain?
Are these PowerPoints on campus?
No.
Okay.
The notes with blanks are for this one. And starting with chapter 2, the notes will be almost exactly the same as the PowerPoint. I think it's better. I decided that was better. I like the outline thing, but I don't think it'd be easier. I think it'd be easier for you guys to study if you have almost these PowerPoints. All right, I like to spend time studying in class, like reviewing terms and stuff, so you have less time to do it at home. I like activities, I like games. I'm very competitive. I'm extremely competitive, can be to a fault. But I like to do that in class. And I have some students, can't we just all be on the same team? I'm like, no, you can't be on the same team. You have to compete and you have to beat the other team. So I don't know how you guys are, but yeah.
Do you have siblings?
I do.
Where are you in the
Well,
order?
my siblings are 16, 14, and 12 years older than me.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
So I was,
You're the youngest one.
I'm the youngest, but I was pretty much raised alone.
The youngest one is always the best one.
Yeah, because you got to keep up. But I didn't really have that. They weren't around when I grew up, so I don't know, because it's just innate. But most of my activities that I do have to do with something you pass or something you grab or working directly with someone. So I'm trying to think of other things to do. Some of the less interesting ones I'm coming up with. So we'll do baseball. I started to say, even as an adult, I like stuff like this. So if you feel like I'm being juvenile with you, you can tell me after class, but I enjoy games. I love playing games. I play Yahtzee with my mom every day online. Okay. What do you want the teams to be? We have 7. It has to be 3 against 4. You 3 against those 4?
Sure.
What's your team's name?
We're the Huskies.
Oh.
Oh, so it's gonna be 3 and
Keep going, bro.
And you 4, what's your team name?
We're also going to be no, I'm just kidding.
we're gonna
Also Huskies.
2.0.
No.
The Daves.
Yeah, the
The Daves. The Huskies versus the Daves.
Daves?
Daves, like
Dave,
Davis.
like David.
Oh, Daves, okay. I thought you said babes. I thought, oh, maybe that's not a good one. All right. Okay, so I have to remember how to do this. We'll start with you, and if you get it right, you get on first base. Next person gets it right, etc. Until,
My answer is good enough. Can I get a home run?
That's right.
no, sometimes I can do double plays.
Oh,
It's really hard, but we'll say.
I'm trying to steal a play.
And you get 3 outs. And then it becomes the other team's turn. Okay, the science of human behavior and mental processes. And yes, you will be able to steal it, but I won't repeat the question. I will repeat it because I distracted you. The science of human behavior and mental processes.
Psychology.
Yay!
Good job. I was gonna
Oh, I'm
say.
trying to get that question.
I was gonna say.
Okay,
Even if I didn't get that.
a research. Okay, but you gotta have your laptops down.
Oh, I was gonna pull up the quiz.
Yeah.
I didn't look though. I didn't look.
is there a way that we could get multiple choice?
No. A research perspective whose major explanatory focus is on the brain, nervous system, and other physiological mechanisms that produce behavior and mental processes. Which perspective is physiological?
That's for me.
That's for you.
Is this a team manager question?
That's for me.
Okay.
For now.
Oh, can we help?
No helping.
Oh my goodness.
Look at her smile.
You gotta stay on.
And I think maybe I'll give you like a 5-second.
Can I get striked out?
You will get 1 strike. All right, next question. Okay. I guess we'll only do a steal if it's the 3rd strike. The answer to that was biological. The biological research perspective has to do with the physiological, the brain stuff, the brain functions. A research perspective whose major explanatory focus is how mental processes, such as perception, memory, and problem-solving work, and impact behavior. The mental processes.
Is that the behavioral one?
That is not. That is the cognitive one. So biological is the brain, physiological. Cognitive is the mental process. A research perspective whose major explanatory focus is on how external environmental events condition observable behavior. That is behavioral. Woo!
2 for 2.
Hey, wait a minute. Were you just looking at the notes?
I was trying to get there.
That's cheating.
I know.
A research perspective whose major explanatory focus is on how other people in the cultural context impact behavior and mental processes.
She's going over the 4 things in grades.
So we said psychological, we said
No,
cognitive.
psychology, cognitive, behavioral. There's one more that she's getting at. One. Yep.
We did biological, cognitive, and
Oh,
behavioral.
I mean biological, my bad.
Isn't that what I said? Yeah.
No.
How culture influences things.
Cultural? No.
No. Oh.
College?
So wait,
College?
don't say it. So you've struck out. First question goes to you. Same question.
That's how you have to start.
I have no clue. What was the question again?
No, that was his answer. No clue.
Okay.
That was okay.
A research perspective whose major explanatory focus is on how other people and the cultural context, impact behavior and mental processes is sociocultural perspective. So you have the biological, it's body brain, or body physical. Cognitive is the brain. Just remember when we're talking in this book, they're going to use mind and brain interchangeably. The other book, mind, he's referring to the soul. And he actually doesn't use mind very often because of that, because it's often confused with brain. And then the behavioral is environment. That's the only one that doesn't connect. The words don't connect nicely, like biological, cognitive. Behavioral is the external environment, and then social cultural is the culture. All right, whose turn is it?
There's
Rachel.
So does he get another question because
Yeah,
of his story?
that was a.
I think good, Crystal. I can do that.
You can go to the next person, but they didn't get an out. Okay, what is the term for I knew it all along phenomenon? The tendency after learning about an outcome to be overconfident in one's ability to have predicted it. Woo. Well done. All right. Research methods whose main purpose is to provide objective and detailed descriptions of behavior and mental processes. Research method whose main purpose is to provide descriptions of behavior and mental processes.
I have no idea.
Descriptive methods. That'd be easy if you had a multiple choice. There are different types of descriptive methods. One type of descriptive research method in which the behavior of interest is observed in its natural setting, and the researcher does not intervene in the behavior being observed. The behavior is observed and described in the natural setting. Natural observation.
Yeah.
So you're going to kick yourself.
Something in observation.
Okay, how about, we're back to you, a descriptive research method in which the observer becomes a part of the group being observed. They actually join in and live with the monkeys, or go into the classroom covertly and
Yeah, they
pretend they're a student.
accept them. Yeah. I remember reading it.
Whose turn is it?
That's mine.
That's my turn.
Oh,
It's at the.
Yeah, wrong, it's
I don't know.
okay, whose turn is it over here?
Rebecca's turn, 'cause
Wait.
it ended on Kiko.
Who had the last question over here?
Oh, yeah, it would be Rebecca.
Okay. Beans.
I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Is that it?
No, participant observation.
That's the, what you're talking about is the I knew it all along method.
Oh, yeah, I'm so used to it.
All right, another descriptive method. A descriptive research method in which the researcher studies an individual in depth over an extended period of time. So we'll take one person and study them over their lifespan.
Oh, I
Okay.
was just looking at
I shouldn't do that with my finger.
I was gonna have my Apple Watch.
Yeah, me too.
No eraser.
Really saying it's just like baseball. Sorry.
I was just gonna guess an observation.
Incorrect. Case study. They take one.
study.
They take one person and do it over the time. Okay, you're going to know the next one.
You're gonna know the next
I'm
one?
gonna know the next one. I think
Yes, I think you will. A descriptive research method in which the researcher uses questionnaires and interviews
Survey.
to collect information about the behavior, beliefs, and attitudes of a particular group of people. All right, I have no points yet. The entire group of people that a researcher is studying. Oh, I forgot my bag of candy again.
Population what?
Population, correct. Okay, back to you. The subject of a population that actually participates in a research study. No, the subset of a population.
Ooh, easy.
Yeah, I don't know that. I'm gonna say.
Take a random guess.
Sample. Yeah, the whole population, and then you take a sample.
I did read that yesterday.
I went to the.
Okay. A sampling technique that obtains a representative sample of a population by ensuring that each individual in a population has an equal opportunity to be in the sample.
Yes. And I don't.
I dropped a major hint last.
I don't think so.
Can you say that? Can you say
A sampling technique that obtains a representative sample by ensuring that each individual is represented. Equal opportunity to be in the sample. Sorry.
Definitely gonna have to make some notes.
It's not random sample.
It is. Okay. It's up to you. A research study in which two variables are measured to determine if they are related. How well either one predicts the other. A type of study in which two variables are measured to determine if they're related. Or another way of saying it, how well one predicts the other. Is that your answer?
Unfortunately, yes.
Incorrect. Whose turn is it over here?
We almost made it. Run.
Yes, it is a correlational study.
I thought.
It's a hard word to say.
Good job.
All righty. Cairo. Any factor that can take on more than one value in a study.
Could you repeat that?
any factor that can take on more than one value.
Strike.
Variable. That's like height, grade point average. Those are all test score, can have different
It is
variables.
flexible, but then not variable.
No cars. I'm gonna do it this afternoon.
Are you all familiar with Quizlet?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I gotta write it down.
It's good for you to write it.
I have
Good.
to write it at least like 10 times.
What did they say during one of our meetings? You remember like what, 60% of what you write down?
Yeah. And not type. Actual writing.
Right.
All right. A statistic that tells us the type and strength of the relationship between two variables. The sign of the coefficient, plus or minus, indicates the type of correlation, positive or negative, respectively. The absolute value of the coefficient represents the strength of the correlation.
Ooh.
You have a guess?
Yeah.
Correlation coefficient. Remember, that can be, if you're going this way, positively correlated, like height and weight, or negatively correlated, like altitude and temperature. The sign of the coefficient tells you whether it's positive or negative. The number tells you the strength. Whose turn is it? A direct relationship between two variables. Did I give you your strike?
No. Is that a positive correlation?
That is. Oh ho! An inverse relationship. This is chance. I'm going in order.
Adverse relationship, negative correlation.
Yep. Oh, what stress? What pressure here?
What's that? Just got a strike. Not a good team player.
The tendency for extreme or unusual values on one variable to be matched on average with less extreme values on the other variable when the two variables are not perfectly correlated.
Give them a more choice.
It's all good.
So the tendency for extreme or unusual values. So if a basketball player gets 100 points in a game, is that a lot?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
I know in high school they make it a big
Hall
deal.
of Fame a lot.
Oh yeah, okay. So if he gets 100 points in a bunch of games, generally he will end up getting fewer points after that. What is that called?
Shrinkage.
All right, can you steal it? Regression toward the mean. You'll end up going back to the average. So if his average is 85 points,
Those multiple
Oh,
choice.
I played basketball too,
Oh, okay.
and he gets 100 a bunch of times,
Regression or what?
he's going to end up going regression toward the mean. He's going to end up getting fewer scores after that because that's his maybe his average. All right, let's do one. They don't do this in baseball. Soccer, we do a kickoff.
PK.
And you can work together. But stay in your seats, so kind of mouth it to each other.
Not good freaks. Okay.
A visual depiction of correlational data in which each data point represents the scores on the two variables for each participant. A visual depiction or correlational data in which each data point represents the scores on the two variables for each participant.
Oh, we have to make it or go.
You know that.
You three can work together.
Yeah, I'm definitely skying this ball.
It's theirs,
Yes, yes.
okay?
We pick scatter plot.
So you guys get one, if you get this one, we keep going. If you miss, then they
I
win.
just can't think of it. I know what
A
it was.
correlation in which the variables are related through their relationship with one or more other variables, but not through a causal mechanism.
No. Do we get to say?
It's theirs,
Okay.
their kick. We switched to soccer.
Go for it.
Spurious correlation. Like those ones, the strange things that we had, snake bites related to marriage, whatever. Well, they're correlated, but it's spurious because there's some other connection. Okay, well, okay. We ended with a tie. Everybody's a winner.
0-0. No 13 innings today?
All right, next week, chapter 2.
There can only be one winner though.
We're all
Not in
winners.
soccer.
Oh, in soccer, you're right.
Not for me.
Well, we are in this for today.
You rock paper,
I don't like,
rock paper.
I like somebody to win, but
So I figured
it is time to go.
1v1.
You are dismissed. Alrighty.
I feel like this is closer to the other one.
Oh, stop.